Hi, today I'm talking about informed consent form for the discussion board. I found an informed consent form from George T. Egling Middle School in Colosa, California. In the consent form, I found that it does a good job of answering or following the ACA Code of Ethics A.2.B and A.2.E, in that it discusses the nature of the services that are provided, and it informs the students of the limitations of the services, saying that it cannot do an official diagnosis type thing. I also saw kind of an overlapping pattern with the ACA ethical standards for school counselors in also A.2.B, A.2.E, but also A.2.F, in that it also still provides the information about what services are provided, and it informs the limitations of those services. And for A.2.E, it discusses the limitations of the confidentiality agreement and what they can keep confident and what they cannot, which kind of leads up to what A.2.F says in ACA ethical standards for school counselors in keeping information confidential unless legal requirements demand confidential information, or unless a student is showing causes for serious harm to themselves or to others. But there are several things that I noticed in this informed consent form that weren't quite addressed in relation to the ACA methods that are mentioned in this article. There's no discussion of techniques or procedures that are talked about in the consent form. It basically just tells you the line of work that they're going, like the services that they can, like the certain topics, that they can cover while talking to you as a counselor, but they do not mention what kind of techniques they use to help students process those certain topics. It does not talk about any procedures used to help students through certain things, and it doesn't really talk about risk except for on the end of confidentiality risks and limited ability risk, but it doesn't really talk about the risks that come with the possible procedures and techniques that would be used to help the students in those certain topics that are mentioned in the article. Also, in regards to the comparing of how this relates to our requirements here in Washington, the requirements are pretty much all met, except for that there's the difference in the information of the school counselor. There's not much information about the school counselor themselves inside the informed consent form. It just states what the school counselor can provide and the confidentiality topic, but it doesn't really tell you who the school counselor is, what their qualifications are, what kind of therapeutic methods are used, what is their credentials, what kind of education or training or experience they have. So it doesn't really cover the aspect of what the school counselor actually is capable of doing in their job. So there is a fault in that, in the fact that it would not be considered an informed consent form here in Washington because that information is left out. And so other than that, it kind of meets every other aspect of the requirements for Washington. And that information comes from the Washington Board of Education, I think. Sorry, I'll correct myself. It is actually the Washington legislative information in the individual Washington state legislative agreements on what the school counselor is capable of doing.